Good evening, and thank you for coming tonight. I'm really excited to be here at the beautiful Southbury Library, and I'd like to thank Rebecca for hosting and for all of you attending and taking time out of your day to help you understand my understanding of the paranormal and my experiences since I began when I was just a sophomore in college. And just to give you a little background about who I am and what I've done before I get into the meat and potatoes of all of these incredible cases that occurred, I'd like everybody to understand that we are all experiencing life in our own way, right? We have an information field, which is our auric field around us, which is particular to our experiences. And from the moment we're born all the way into the present day. Yes, sorry. So I was always interested in spirits, and I always was studying at the library and so forth. And my middle school homeroom teacher said, when the mind catches up with the body, it will be awesome, because I was 6 feet when I was 11 years old. But and I was always hungry for information, so I was always in the library. How's that volume? Is it okay, everybody? Can you hear me? Okay. And I'd always known that we are temporarily animating a physical body, even when I was a little kid, and having our own experiences for our own and highest and best good. And when I was a senior in high school at Staples High School in Westport, Connecticut, I picked up a book off the shelf called The Demonologist. And it was the most terrifying cases that this couple, enigmatic couple named Ed and Lorraine Warren, were experiencing. And since they began delving into this supernatural world in the 50s and longer. And I read the book, and I was absolutely terrified for the families that were experiencing these types of activity. And these were demonic cases, and I didn't really know what that was. But when I read about the activity that was taking place in people's homes, I was terrified for them, because my God, why in the world are people experiencing these types of horrors? But especially for the children. No child should have to experience these incredible attacks taking place inside these homes. And I said, why in the world? I asked myself, why in the world is this taking place? Why is it allowed to take place? And I had known that the Warrens actually were from Monroe, Connecticut, and I actually lived there for a portion of my life. We had a house on Forest Road. And, Connecticut's a very small state. So if I wanted to seek them out, I really think I would have been able to do so. But I put the book back on the shelf, and I really had no interest in getting involved, getting to know them, or delving further into this type of phenomena. And it was 4 years, So I wanted to go to college for English creative writing, because I had a passion for writing. And I wanted to go to Emerson College in Boston or Roger Williams in Rhode Island. But my father was footing the bill, and he said, you're never going to make it as an author. So you're going to go to a communications degree at a public university, a state university. So he actually convinced me to go to Eastern Connecticut State University after I graduated Staples in 1986. I didn't like the school, but the entire freshman class had to read Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody for English 101 required reading about near-death experience studies. He's the most accomplished near-death experience researcher there was, and the entire freshman class had to read this book. Now, everything that's taken place in my life, and this is a very important aspect of it, is a synchronicity. And everything just happens in that way. And it's not a coincidence. Coincidence is a random element, but a synchronicity is something that was meant to be, that actually helps this lifetime, continue in the way that it's meant to unfold. And I've always known that there's a higher power controlling everything. And I've always felt intimately connected to that higher power, but I never had any real profound spiritual experiences or religious experiences. But I've known that, we are fields of awareness temporarily animating a physical body to have this experience in this third dimension. And I didn't quite know how to articulate that, of course, when I was younger, but I do now. But that was amazing to me, because it was actually the most fascinating study that I've ever delved into, aside from reading about these horrible demonic cases. But the most remarkable one was when a boy left his body during a traumatic event, and he found himself seeing a huge tree, and he says, "Oh, I wonder what it would be like to move into that tree." And within an instant, he was there by the tree and moving into the tree effortlessly. He wasn't walking, or because we have no physical body at that point. We're fields of awareness at this point. We're consciousness, disembodied consciousness. And he didn't know how to describe that, of course. But moving into the tree, he felt so alive and full of energy from the tree, coming up through the root systems into the tree. He felt like he had 100 arms and 1,000 fingers, is the way he described it. Amazing. And then he moved into, I wonder what it would be like to move into that rock. It was a big boulder. And he moved into this boulder. And he felt cold and clammy and trapped. And he says, "Oh gosh, what if I've chosen to remain inside this boulder through my thoughts of moving into the boulder? I better get out of here quick in case, the God says, 'Oh, you chose the boulder. You're stuck in the boulder from now on.'" And he had humor. And he said, "I am me. I'm still me. My body's laying right there." He'd collapsed. "I'm still me. I have all of my memories, and I can actually experience humor at this point." But that was really astounding to me. And another one was when a young man, he was 18 years old, and I was 18 at the time, was whitewater rafting with his best friend, and the raft flipped, and he got pinned underneath the weight of the water coming from the falls down into the riverbed. And he struggled and he struggled and he couldn't get out. And he realized, "Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to run out of breath." And he drew the breath, breathed in the water, and surprisingly, he felt warmth, right? And he felt fine. And he felt like his arms were contracting until he had no arms anymore. And like his legs were contracting until he had no legs anymore. And his head was contracting until he was just, all I could describe it was as a ball of energy. And he focused his awareness upward and above, he sees the water there, and he floated up effortlessly above the water, focused his attention downward. I don't want to say looked downward because he had no eyes at that point, but he's focusing his awareness downward. And there he sees his body, lifeless body, beneath the water. And he said, "I can see my body, but I have no physical eyes. And I can hear the sound. I can see my friend frantically trying to find me because he knows he's running out of air, but I have no ears. And I can make sense out of what I'm seeing and hearing and discerning, but my physical brain was within my body, which is beneath the water on the riverbed." And he had these startling revelations. And basically, he was trying to tell his friend, "It's okay, all right, I'm up here, I'm okay," But of course, he couldn't perceive him. And he moved over onto the shoreline and so forth. And then he had an experience where he heard his high school wrestling coach say, "You didn't even try." And he's like, "Oh, crap," right? And it was his high school wrestling coach who had passed on. And he was basically getting the impression that, "I taught you to fight. You didn't even try to get out of there. You just gave up." And he felt a light descend upon him, and he felt a warmth that he can't even describe. The fascinating thing with the near-death experience studies is that people see colors that they can't describe when they're back in their bodies. They hear sounds they can't describe when they're back in their bodies because there's no frame of reference. Okay? We are so limited in this physical body. I'll get to that in a minute. But when we're outside of the body, it's like we're outside of the insulated, very, very limited body and the limited awareness that we have. So he was shown a line from that extended as far as you can see to the left and far to the right. And there was a hash mark, and it says, "This is where you came into this life." He felt that the presence he was communing with was God. Right? That's the only thing he could describe it. It was a peaceful love and an incredible feeling that he felt. This is where you came into this life. This is where we are now. This is where you'd planned to exit. Okay. And he was asked, "You can stay here, or you can go back. It's your choice." Many people don't get the choice. Others are told, "No, you have to go back. You have unfinished business." And this is a very, very interesting phenomenon that takes place with near-death experiencers. Is some are told they have to go back. Some are told you have the choice. But he was shown somehow, this is what will happen if you choose to go. right? And they showed an ambulance and the body being dragged out of the river and the family weeping and the funeral and all that stuff. How can that possibly be if it hadn't even happened? Does anybody know why? Okay, I thought Steve might. Steve's a pretty smart guy. A lot of smart people, of course. But anyway, he wanted to accomplish in this lifetime, and he was a musician. He wanted to play. He was a flute player. He wanted to open up for Arlo Guthrie. And but anyway, the millisecond he decided he was going to go back, he's back inside his body in great pain because of the pressure of the water in his chest. He's struggling, and he said he had to get out, and he got out, of course. And he got to the edge and so forth, and he was fine. And he, like everybody else who's had a near-death experience, has no fear of death any longer, right? He knows when he's supposed to be checking out or leaving this particular lifetime or incarnation. And he ended up opening up for Arlo Guthrie, it turns out, according to the story. I have no way to verify it, but that's what he says, right? But that is just phenomenal to me. So that'll kind of give you an example about what it's going to be like when you vacate the physical body, and also what you're dealing with when you're interacting with an earthbound human spirit. So keep in mind, I'm in college at this point. I read this book. I was totally fascinated by it and put it out of my mind. And I didn't go back to school that second year. I took a year and a half off. I got into my first rock and roll band, and my dad was furious, of course, because he thought I was going to turn into a hippie and not complete my college education. But I really didn't like Eastern Connecticut. But what are the chances that I would go to this university and be part of a curriculum that forced me to read this amazing book, which completely changed my life? Pretty slim. So it was 4 years after that, so it was 1990. I was with my friend Lou in his car, and he was a paramedic with a former Army combat medic with the rank of captain, huge strapping Italian guy, this big mustache. And we're in his car, and we're listening to the radio at that point. That's ancient technology, I know, but that was, we're listening to the radio, and it was about the 3 Men and a Baby incident, where during the filming or the editing phase, when the camera panned, they saw the shadowy form of a hunting rifle behind the curtain, sticking out beside the curtain. They're like, what was that? And when they panned back, because they had filmed it and panned back, there was a shadowy form of a boy, teenage boy, holding the hunting rifle, peeking from behind the curtain, black shadowy form. So they didn't know what was going on. There was no rifle on the set. There was no teenage boy on the set anywhere. So they called in who? The Warrens, right? And Lorraine discerned that this was a teenage boy who had committed suicide on the property with the high-powered rifle, and that turns out to be exactly what took place. And I turned to my friend Lou, and I said, that would be so cool to work with them. And he said, yeah, no kidding. The next day, you know this story, Jerry, right? The next day, he called me and said, you aren't going to believe who just called me. Who? Ed Warren. I'm like, what? Right? Ed was having heart issues at the time. He called the chief of EMS to have a medic recommended for the team. He recommended Lou because Lou was a combat medic in the Army. And a lot of these cases that the Warrens were investigating that were very, very serious were, combat situations in some cases. So they invited Lou to come to their Monday night class in their museum room next to the house in Monroe. Are you familiar with that? The layout, sir? Okay. You're nodding, I thought you would say. Anyway, I said, you have to get me in there. It's time. It was not time 4 years prior. Mm-hmm. And I call that another amazing synchronicity. That'd be so cool to work with them. Yeah, no kidding. Bam. When I was ready to do it, that's when it manifested for me. And I call that universal law of intention. I intended to work with them. That'd be so amazing to be able to be involved with this enigmatic couple that is experiencing all of these amazing hauntings. So Lou got to go to their class the Monday night, and he told Lorraine all about this synchronicity. So again, she knows all about synchronicities because she heard the entire situation versus a coincidence. So she said, okay, invite Jason next Monday night. And he relayed that information. So I got to go. And I was elated. I felt my whole world is just opening up. at exactly the right time. I mean, again, I was a sophomore in college. I was ready to unlock the secrets of the universe and so forth. And I spent my entire childhood preparing for this stuff, studying about paranormal. Paranormal wasn't a thing back then. It was just ghost stories, right? Now it's the paranormal this, the paranormal that. And so I got to go, and I opened the door to the Warren School of Paranormalology, the New England Society for Psychic Research, and guy my age or slightly older opened the door, and his name was Drew Thompson, and he's one of my good close friends to this day, and very psychic in his own right, and was a great asset to the team. And there in the distance, I see Lorraine, and with this big beaming smile, and she had her telltale bun on the top of her head, and she's just beaming, and it's like she glided right over. Hi, Jason, I'm Lorraine Warren, honey. How strong is your faith, honey? And she's just looking right through me, right? And I said, I have immense faith instantly, right? I believe that I and the Father are one, as are we all. And she nodded and smiled. Why do you want to get involved in work of this nature? She asked me. And it was always of this nature to her, right? Spirit phenomena. And I explained that I read the demonologists, and I was really concerned for the families, but really, really concerned for the children. And she asked, so it's a calling then? And I said, I believe it is. And she said, well, welcome aboard. And so in I went. And I was in this amazing room full of amazing people who were genuinely interested in helping people in these very severe cases that were taking place, because that's really what the Warrens got involved in. And sat down and listened to Ed Warren talk about the cases that they were currently investigating. Now, Ed, of course, who doesn't know Ed Warren? Everybody knows generally who he is. He was one of 7 demonologists in the time, the only non-ordained one. He'd studied with monks of all faiths, and he had an incredible amount of knowledge. And he and Lorraine made the perfect couple, because she was the sensitive, the light trance medium, psychic, and he was the very, very serious investigator, but he was also one who constantly made jokes. And he did that to raise the levity, raise the vibration of the situation, because it's all about vibration, as you'll soon discover when I discuss these situations that I was getting involved in. So we got to hear about these cases. And the very first case that he discussed it was a newlywed couple. They'd purchased an older home. They'd moved in. And every night, like clockwork, the couple claimed that through the wall would come the full apparition of a woman, the white dress, just smoky white apparition, who would walk through their wall, disregard them completely, walk toward the doorway, walk down the hallway, stop in front of the baby's crib that they would have in the other room when the baby was sleeping in there, scare the baby out of its wits, and then walk through the crib and disappear through that wall every evening like clockwork. Pretty cut and dry. What is amazing to me is Ed and Lorraine Warren assigned Lou and I to that case alone the very next night, representing the Warrens. And I'm like, what? Right? I said, I was gung ho, but I was like, how can this even be? I haven't even been trained. So, but it was amazing. And I went home and I borrowed my mom's VHS camcorder, went and bought a tripod at Radio Shack in Westport. And Lou and I went to this couple's house and we interviewed them as we were told to. We did a walk through the house and the exterior of the house and had them on camera and have them describe to us what they were experiencing every evening. So I set the tripod up in the parents' room, aiming at the wall where she would be seen coming through every night so we can see where she comes through. And I drew all the blinds. They had, those blinds that you turn the rod and they close. And I lit some candles to have some kind of illumination in there. And then Lou and I and the husband and wife waited down the hallway in the baby's room. And we're all waiting and waiting. And all of a sudden we heard a clap, like a clack, and a bright blue flash of light, like lightning had gone off in that side of that room. And we all looked at each other with our jaws hanging slack. And did you see that? We all confirmed that we all saw it. And we're like, okay, that's it. That's the doorway opening. It's the Stargate, the wormhole, the vortex, the window in time and space. And here is this woman's going to come right down the hallway looking right at us. And we're waiting with bated breath, but no woman came. So we waited another 5 minutes and decided we'd walk into the bedroom and find out what the origin of the clack sound was. And we all smelled a very potent almond smell, like a sweet almond smell. What was that? We didn't know. And we didn't notice anything else out of the ordinary. Granted, I wasn't psychic at the time. Lou certainly wasn't. And the couple never claimed to have any kind of abilities to see, outside of the range of perception that normal human people can. So we waited back in the hallway, back in the bedroom again, waiting. And exactly 30 minutes later, because I was timing everything, another crack happened. Another flash of light happened, but both were half as intense as the first one. We waited and nothing happened. We walked in the room, the smell was half as intense, is what I meant. And after about 2 more hours, nothing happened. We're all, of course, very disappointed, but I thought we are going to get the most amazing evidence of this bright blue flash of light. Again, like lightning had gone off. I said, it's going to be so bright, we're not even going to be able to tell where it originated from, maybe. But we decided we wanted to put that tape into the VHS machine to see what we got, right? Because we all were very curious. And I put it in the machine, and I'm doing the fast forward and play at the same time. So it's, it's making that squiggles and so forth, and candle lights flickering and so forth. And we're waiting. I played it, we're waiting. And we hear my voice say, we've just experienced the second flash of light. There was nothing at all on the VHS tape. But then Lou said, do you hear that? We're like, what? That is a diarthritic heartbeat, right? He identified, and I can't remember if that's the exact name, but he identified a heartbeat that only he would be able to hear because that's what he's trained to do. We all were completely oblivious to the whole thing. He identified a second heartbeat and his eyes just, bulging. And he identified a third distinct heartbeat, which couldn't possibly be happening because there was no physical body close enough to the camcorder when this was happening, nor was it sensitive enough to pick up a heartbeat within somebody's chest. Yet there it was, as plain as day. And again, we all would have missed it completely. So we all decided, that was very strange, of course. So we left that evening. I dropped the tape off to the Warrens. So what would happen is the investigators would go out and they would investigate certain cases. They'd return all the written reports and any evidence, VHS or audio cassettes or still photographs and so forth with them so they can go over it. So they can discuss what is happening the next week. So I returned it. We were there the next week, and Lorraine said, obviously this woman is here, and she wasn't going to give us any evidence or manifestation of her walking down the hallway, but we all saw the bright blue flash of light. So how is that possible? That nothing was on the tape, but we all saw it. They may know. So at that point, Lorraine explained that all hauntings begin in the mind. And through our pineal gland, right? It's got rods and cones, it's photosensitive, it's called the third eye for a reason. It's our interdimensional connection with the creator and source of all things, with the higher dimensions and so forth. And she projected that light right into our third eyes. It's how we have full color dreams when we're sleeping in our pitch black bedrooms with our eyes closed. It's how we daydream and can see movies going on in our head, right? It is the interface. The pineal and the pituitary working in unison is actually how this takes place. It's the reason why lots of children see imaginary playmates and they can see ghosts, which are these imaginary playmates, which are not imaginary at all, but they're able to perceive them, right, through their pineal gland. And now there are, of course, genuine psychics who can see as adults, but our pineal gland gets calcified through the years. Interestingly enough, through fluoride. Fluoride will calcify your pineal gland. So it's put in all the dentistry. It's put into the water supply. It's a carcinogen. It's a byproduct of the aluminum industry. It makes people docile. They put it in the concentration camps, in the water supply in the concentration camps. The Germans did. And so we can get into conspiracy all we want to, but all it's doing is it's locking everybody down from having an interdimensional connection of their own, especially into adulthood, because they're bombarded with the fluoride. But most children, we call it pulling down the veil when those abilities get turned off. I had a big discussion on Greg's podcast about fluoride a couple of weeks ago, right, Greg? But it is fascinating, right? But anyway, all hauntings begin in the mind. So if you're sitting in your house by yourself, you know no one else is home, and you hear creaking floorboards above you, how is this possible? There's no physical body up there applying physical weight to the floorboards to cause them to creak, right? There's nobody opening and closing doors, yet you hear the door and scare you out of your mind, or you'll hear voices in your mind, just common haunting phenomena. How are these things possible? Because it's all just being beamed right into your head. All right, so all you have to do is beam the sound directly into your mind. You'll pick it up, you'll hear it, and you'll get freaked out, and you'll think, there's an intruder in my house, or I'm going crazy, right? But it is so easy for even earthbound human spirits, which means us, when we leave the insulated bodysuit, to be able to interact with those who are still in body, operating beyond human perception. So let's get into the human perception part, right? We couldn't see her in that house, but Lorraine is convinced that she was there. So we couldn't perceive this human spirit. What the situation is, and I discovered this many years later, is the human eyes are only capable of perceiving visible light. Do you know how large visible light is? How large that bandwidth of frequencies is? Pathetically small. We can perceive with our physical eyes 1%, less than 1%. It's less than 1% of the matter, space, and energy around us. Yet, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist, right? Ludicrous. We are blind in these bodies. Cats and dogs can perceive more than we can. And if the dog is barking in the corner and its hair is standing on end and it's snarling viciously at something up in the corner of the room, you'd better be sure to understand that that dog senses something and it's trying to protect you, right? Cats as well. Horses, dolphins, they're all able to perceive more of the pathetic frequency band that we can see. Now, genuine psychics can see more of that frequency band, not every frequency band, but they can perceive more of it. But they can also perceive your information field, and that's how they get the information from you. So again, it's very important to understand that we are not just physical bodies. We're fields of awareness, temporarily animating a body. When the body fails, we vacate the body, like the near-death experience cases revealed, and you either cross over and you go on into the higher spiritual dimensions or home to God or source or heaven, wherever you want to go, or you remain earthbound. So this was the mind-bending information that I was starting to experience firsthand working with the Warrens. Now, all the investigators had no interest in getting known, right? There were no selfies. We had no cell phones. We were using old-fashioned Polaroids and I don't even know what to describe the technology. It's like it's ancient technology. I can't even believe it. It's crazy. Film, yeah, magnetic film, which is much different than digital, right? Now, spirits, human spirits, us, minus the bodies, all you have to do is think about it, right? It's you minus your body. Same personality, same quirks, same desires. It's you. Minus physical body that we can see and touch, but you're right there standing with us, right? For as long as you decide to. The problem is if you remain earthbound for a very long period of time, that can have some negative consequences, but as we'll discover, okay? So does anybody find this interesting? Yeah? Okay, good. Have a good night. No. But it's all part of my journey, right? And I'm just one guy and I'm nobody special, right? But I'm sharing my experiences because they all snowballed, okay? And they are all continuing one after the other into one aha moment after another until the point where I felt I need to share this information with everybody. And that's why I'm here tonight. Again, thank you so much for coming. So give yourselves a round of applause, please. It's great, to have people interested in information. So if this helps anybody, my mission is complete. And I think it'll help everybody. So, or at least give you a different perspective. You don't have to believe it, but it's my perspective and I'm sticking to it. So that intrigued me. so much, and I wanted to see. Lorraine could see, she can perceive human spirits. Andy, Drew, Tom, she always called, and I do it too. And Lorraine always called my friend Drew Andy, and he still doesn't understand it to this day. And I keep getting the names mixed up too, and he chuckles when I do it. But he was very sensitive too, very psychic in his own right. And it was fantastic to have multiple people with different talents on this group. We had photographers, psychics, and when we had three people together, three specific people, they got phenomenal photographs. When they were alone, we didn't get any. And when I say phenomenal, who here knows what ectoplasm is? Come on, Steve, you know what ectoplasm is. What? It's energy, right? Being cast off. That is, looks like a milky white goop, okay? Like a fog, like a cotton energy, right? The stuff that ghosts are made of, right? That we see, because that's what comes out on the film. So when those three people together, we would start with an orb, which Lorraine always just called a ghost light. And now it's called orbs, right? A ghost light. And then it would take an oblong form, and then it would turn into like a bowling pin. Then it would turn into a humanoid shape. And then you'd have arms and legs and a head and a torso. And then if you kept going, you would get a full-fledged apparition appearing right before you, which, due to something called residual image, will appear just like the physical form of the consciousness that vacated the physical form. What's interesting is many cases where people met a very awful, untimely death, whether their heads were cut off or they were burned alive, they'll actually project themselves appearing that way. And what will that do? Scare the living daylights out of you, right? And you'll think it's something monstrous and inhuman, but it's really how they see themselves. And people who are lurking around through the decades or the centuries tend to become darker energy. They forget what it was like to be once human because they've been out of the body for so long. And you don't sleep. You don't need any food. You don't need any sleep or rest, and you're constantly doing things. They'll actually take on a guise or a form that will actually, you'll find very, frightening or offensive. Anyhow, the next case we got made aware of was what Ed would call a demonic case. So what is a demon? Fallen angel. Ed would describe it as something that's never walked the earth in human form. All right. Now, if you can think that we are physical bodies in the third dimension, all right, and we can vacate the body and be a spirit body, what else is around us at that point? What do people perceive when they're in that state? In that state, they can also go into what they call the astral plane, right, which is just a different level of awareness, different frequency band and so forth. I've never visited it. But all kinds of things are lurking around that we are not able to perceive. The same way we're not able to perceive our loved ones who could be in this very room, people who've left that are, hoping to communicate and so forth. They could be with us with but a thought, okay? The same way negative entities can be with you with but a thought, as we'll hear shortly. So Ed took me by myself. Again, I was the newest, youngest member of the New England Society for Psychic Research. He took me in his car. He had a license plate that said Ghost. He had a vanity plate, which was pretty funny. But just such an amazing man. So cool to be. It's like he's like the grandfather I always wanted to have. My grandfather was great, but didn't really know him that well. But Ed was just so incredible, So we went to this house and we drove by it, and he asked, "What do you feel?" And I said, "Something doesn't feel right. I can't tell you what I don't feel. Or what I feel." And we got out of the car, and approaching the house just felt off. Something was off. Always trust your intuition, right? And if you feel something is not right, just don't do it, right? There's a reason for that, as we'll discuss. So we walked inside, and it was an old house. Felt very strange. I can't even describe how I felt at that point. But he walked into the kitchen, and he opened the door to the basement, and he said, "Down there." And I said, "Okay." So I walked down there, and halfway down the steps, and stopped, and didn't feel anything bizarre, like I didn't feel threatened. And I went all the way down to the bottom, and he said, "Turn the corner." And I turned the corner, and then he turned off the light and slammed the door. All right. And started laughing upstairs and so forth. And I said, okay, this is a test. I'm not afraid. I'm just in the dark. So what am I going to do in the dark? All my sight is turned off, right? But my hearing is more accentuated. Am I going to perceive something through my third eye, my pineal gland? I know I saw that light, so it must be functioning. Okay. But anyway, it took a while. And after about, 2.5 minutes or so, he opened the door, turned on the light, and asked me to come upstairs. And I think I earned a great deal of respect that day, because I didn't freak out and run up the stairs and run out the door and say, I can't deal with this. You scared me out of my mind. Why did you do that to me? But I was serious about it. I wanted to unravel the secrets of the universe. Why in the world are these forces that are described in the Demonologist, who I hadn't yet experienced, wreaking havoc in the lives of ordinary people? I wanted to know. And we left that house, and with several other of the investigators, including my friend Drew, I didn't call him Andy. Wow. All right. We went to a house, and we all sat inside. There were 4 of us, and we're sitting in a sectional sofa system. And on the landing of the steps, Drew and Donna described this black form just standing on the landing. Go up one flight, it's on the landing, the other flight's going upstairs. I didn't perceive anything. And they described it as a negative blackness. You can actually see the black form in a pitch black room. Frequency, vibration, think about it that way, right? Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand reality, think in the terms of frequency and vibration. And so I decided to pull out a pair of blessed rosary beads from my pocket that my grandmother, Nani, gave me. And they happen to be glow in the dark, by the way. And I pulled them out with the intention of protecting myself. Added form of protection. There's a demonic force standing on the landing, watching us. I don't like that. I'm going to pull out some rosary beads. All of a sudden, Jason, what did you do? What? He has rosary beads. Put them away quick, Donna shouts, right? And I'm like, then I'm fumbling. Then I'm getting afraid. I'm becoming frightened. And I'm fumbling with them, and I'm putting them in my hand, shuffling back into my pocket. When I pulled them out, they asked, what did I do? Because this form went right up to me, right? I didn't feel it, didn't perceive it, wasn't afraid, had no idea, because I couldn't, see that frequency band. But pulling out those rosary beads, it went right up to me. And as soon as I put them in my pocket, said, okay, no more, right back up to where it began. And the next class, nothing else happened that I can remember. But the next class, we were discussing that, and I asked, well, what could have happened to Ed? And he said, your intention in that regard was everything. Right? Now, I didn't intend to take those out of my pocket, say, I challenge you in the name of Jason McLeod, right? That would be foolish, and I would invite an attack upon myself, according to Ed. Well, what could it have done to me? I asked. I'm a college sophomore, young guy. It could have strangled you, could have suffocated you, could have scratched you, bitten you, burned you, teleported you. And I was like, I don't think so. I had always felt protected, even when I went to that first house. Because again, I had a belief, and I always had that belief, that I and the Father are one, that I'm protected. I'm surrounded by angelic forces that are protecting me. And if you intend it, and you know it, and you believe it, and you have the faith that that is so, it is so. Your intention is everything in everything that you think and do and say in your lifetime. So that's what Ed said, is if I challenge a demon and in the name of Ed Warren, I'm inviting attacks upon myself that I will not appreciate at all. But that was another very fascinating aspect of this whole situation. And then we got informed of a case that changed my life forever. And this was amazing. And it was a family in Brattleboro, Vermont. That was a tongue twister. Who had fled the house, right? Things were happening in the house that they just couldn't cope with, and they fled. They contacted the Warrens, and we decided that we would all go up there. And I said, ooh, Mom just bought a brand new Caravan, Dodge Caravan, one of the first Caravans that came out. And I offered to drive. I was the youngest, most enthusiastic guy, and I said, I'd love to be able to be the driver and bring Ed and Lorraine and 5 other people in the van, and the rest would follow in the cars. And actually, the first caravan, she bought the very first caravan in Norwalk, Connecticut that came out, and they forgot to put oil and fluids into the engine. And by the time she got home, the whole thing was burnt, but they gave her a new one. And that's the one I got to drive. That's just the history there. So I woke up Saturday morning on November 17th, a week after my mother's birthday, and did my thing. It was very quiet, got into the van, and I had done something that I have never done to date, And I put my hands on the steering wheel and I said, I wash this van in the blood of Jesus Christ, that we are protected traveling to Vermont and protected on our journey home. Amen. I thought that was strange, right? So I got in the, I pulled out. I was going on the Merritt Parkway from Westport up into, getting on the Parkway in Westport, and I'm the only one on the road. It's a beautiful 2-lane road, the Merritt Parkway. And I'm in the left lane, and I'm going, and I see in my rearview mirror this black car racing up. I didn't see the color at that point, but it's a car racing up in the right-hand line. And okay, he's a sports car. He's just going to blast by me and keep going, right? No big deal. He goes blasting up to me and then literally goes parallel with me. And I'm like, what? What's going on? And I didn't look because I'm, a young guy. I'm, make sure I wreck my mother's brand new van. And then it like literally leapt one car length ahead of me. I said, what the heck? And there he is. And he's not going any faster. And I'm slowing down and he's staying the same speed. I'm speeding up. It's like we're mirroring one another. And I was like, I didn't understand that. And all of a sudden I start to see the thing start to shake. Like it's vibrating ever so slightly. Black BMW, wobbling, fishtailing, literally fishtailing, the back wheel spinning out, and I'm slowing down, and he goes right into my lane, 90-degree angle, and I hit the brakes, and I plowed right into his driver's side door, blasting his window out, and I was unharmed, got out, and I asked, are you okay? What's going on? And he's like spitting safety glass out of his mouth. It's like I had solid ice. He was all, he got whaled. So he was pretty disoriented. He's like, I had solid ice, The state police came, surveyed the scene. I felt bad because everybody's backed up behind me. And they said, there's no ice on the roads. It cannot be, it's cold. It was in the 50 or low 50s, I believe, right? Anyway, they said there was no ice on the roads. So they gave him a ticket, right? And at this point, I'm 45 minutes late. The van is still drivable. So I continued into Fairfield, got off at the Hi-Ho Motel exit, 44, where I knew there was a payphone because there were no cell phones back then, right? And I called the Warrens and I explained, hi, Lorraine, I'm terribly sorry, I'm late, I got in an accident. And she's like, she knew something was up. So he asked, tell me exactly what happened. And I told her exactly what happened. And there was a long pause and I hear mumbling in the background, which was Ed. And they almost called the entire investigation off at that point because they realized something had seized control of that car and flung it into my lane. Now, that is why I was told to pray over the car. I'm convinced of that. And my car wasn't taken care of or manipulated in that way. And when I got to the Knollwood Drive in Monroe, and the other guys are out there waiting, and I think, Zaffis was looking at his watch like, are you overslept or something like that, giving me grief. And I went inside and talked to Ed and Lorraine privately, and she asked, are you still willing to continue up to Vermont? And I said, yes. And Lorraine and Ed patted me on the shoulder. See, Lorraine, I told you it was tough, right? And he was doing that to raise the levity of the situation, raise the vibration. This was a very serious situation where we realized people are going to be in danger. If they can manipulate a car, we're dealing with something far more powerful than a human spirit, right? This is just plain facts. So we decided we would continue. And we met Joe Hayjack, who you're going to hear in this video, and he's no longer with us, but he was the oldest guy on the team at that point. We met him up in Winstead, and we continued up into Vermont. And it was this old house, barnyard. And, we went inside. It was cold up there. It was in Vermont. We turned on the heat. and didn't really realize that that's providing or lending all kinds of energy to whatever is in there. That was not a good idea. And that it was also a full moon coming up. We were there in the late afternoon, and we all went, got a bite to eat, came back, and then we started to explore the property. So the history of this case is that there was a woman named Priscilla who was going into labor. She was being rushed by horse and wagon to the midwife who was waiting for her in the house. This is 150 years prior, mind you. And the wagon hit a rut, and the wagon flipped, mangling Priscilla's body and the baby's body and killing them both. And there she went. Her last conscious thought, so what I know now is that her last conscious thought was get to the midwife, get to the baby, where the room was where they were going to deliver the baby, and there she went within a blink of an eye. Again, think about the guy that left his body and just went right into the tree, went right into the rock. Okay, that's how fast you can move. But there she went instantly. Where's my baby? Where's my baby? I can't imagine, of course, what it would be like to lose your child before it was even delivered, and your own life, and then be there wondering where your baby is and being in that perpetual state of grief for 150 years. What I believe now is that there is no space and time outside of this third dimension. So to her, it just happened, right? She's in the now moment that was then, but she's still here now that we're interacting with her. That's my understanding about how these things work. Because think about having to be full of that grief for 150 years, or 300 years, or 1,000 years. I just don't think that's the way the system would work if the creator created it this way. But we all got to the house, we wandered inside and out, and we were investigating the property. And we had the 3 investigators who were asking me to snap photos for them.
That's the angels.
It's the angels, yes.
You know what her name is? Angela. Oh my goodness.
All right. You did tell me you were going to be fun here in the first row. So again, levity. Let's raise the levity a bit. Who here is still awake? You still good? Still finding this interesting? Okay. Okay, so we're in the field, and they asked me to take photographs, and this was high-speed infrared film. Didn't know what that was. Matthew may know, my great camera guy. And so I was taking photos of the 3 of them, who were no further away than Rosie here in the purple shirt. I call her Rosie, but it's Rosalie. But and it said, check distance, right? That was pretty advanced camera, I think, back in 1990. It says, take the picture quick, because it was saying somebody's so close, it's out of focus, right? Snap, 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 snap. We got some great photographs there. I don't have any to show you, but they're not my possession. But when we all decided to go back to the house, I was the last one. It was walking through a cornfield. So there's just the stalks of the corn husks, you know, they're all gold color. And we're walking through the field toward the house, and everybody's walking up ahead of me. And I just stood there, and I turned around. I felt, all right, you know when somebody's looking at you, and you turn around and they're looking at you, and you say, oh, that's interesting. So that's a psychic awareness, right? You're sensing somebody is focusing their awareness on you. The observer is observing you, okay? I looked behind me, didn't see anybody, of course, but I said, come back to the house with us. Oh, he can see me. She didn't know, right? So I made a connection with her just by turning around and acting like I could perceive her and inviting her to come with us back into the house, which is her house. Of course, to her, it was still her home. Now, there she was making that connection with me, and it wasn't because of my unbelievable good looks, even though I was incredibly good looking back then. I'm just trying to raise the level, right? But we went back to the house, and it was at that point where Ed wanted to try to make contact. So we're all sitting around this table in the kitchen, and Lorraine is perceiving this really tall man, shadowy form with a top hat. She's perceiving Priscilla in this beautiful white dress, as is Drew, who's seeing the same things. I was like, I want to see. You know, they're seeing these things. I want to be like Lorraine and Drew. I want to see a ghost, you know. That's what I was saying to myself. It was that passionate plea. I want to see universal law of intention, right? And so we're all sitting around the table, and the goal was to initiate contact. And he wanted the spirits in there. He wanted to gauge what exactly we're dealing with, because we hadn't, other than the car being seized on the way up, we hadn't experienced anything that allowed us to believe that there was any kind of demonic force on the property or in the house, except that really dark man. But he could have just been an earthbound spirit who had been lurking for so long, disembodied, that he's appearing darker energy, which means you're more negative. Right, Steve? And so we're waiting. We're all around the table. And I said, this is my first experience, mind you, where he's trying, Ed, watching my friend and mentor and teacher in action, right? If there are any spirits in this house, enter Jason. I said, that's not funny. I swear to God, right? And I didn't say I do not consent to that, right? Which is what I should have said. But I said, that's not funny. Everybody's chuckling and so forth. And Lorraine said, oh, Ed, you know, making fun of the situation, right? So we're sitting there, and Ed was saying, are there any spirits in this house? Lift the table, right? We wanted to see. And we're all around it. Some of us have our arms on the table. I think I did. And the table starts to vibrate. And I'm correlating what happened with the car. The table's starting to shake. Right? I'm looking at everybody, and everybody's looking around. We're seeing this activity take, then it starts to really wobble, vibrating and wobbling. And then it starts to literally start lifting off of the floor. Let me back up. It's wobbling and shaking, and you'll hear Joe. I'm going to play the audio. Would you like to hear it? I'm going to play the audio, which is intense. So listen at your own risk. It's intense. And this is so cool because you get to hear the Warrens and the other investigators and myself, and it starts to move, and it starts moving toward. Now, here's the fascinating thing. Everybody had a different experience at exactly the same time. Joe thought the table was moving, literally moving toward him as he's sitting in his part of the room. Lorraine saw it moving away from her, but toward the opposite side. And then it subsides. And you'll hear Lorraine saying it's using all of its energy to move the table, right? And then it subsided and stopped. So then it has to re-energize itself. Now, how is it re-energizing itself? Yeah, because we're batteries, right? We are fields of energy, and what emotions cast off the most energy? That's what they use, right? And that's why their MO is always to frighten you, if these are dark or diabolical spirits, mind you, okay? So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden it starts to pick up again. Now, I can either play the video for you now and then explain what it is that was said, or I can explain what it is said and then play the video or the audio. What would you like? Play it? Play it? Show of hands. Play it? You don't look very excited. Play it? All right. So I think I'll just hold this up to my lavalier, right? Oh, look at this. So let's give it up for Matthew. Dark Echo Productions.
Ed and Lorraine Warren and 6 associates are in a house in Brattleboro, Vermont. They are here in regard to a family's plea for assistance regarding unusual phenomenon in the house. We are sitting around a table that just moments before had been moved by spiritual entities. Refer to the written notes as to the exact time of day. Ed Warren notices the table moving again, and I press the record button on the tape recorder. During the recording, a man's voice will say, "It's coming, it's coming." He is referring to the table's movement, and it's rising. His voice will increase with the excitement of the moment. Moving the table. It's moving hard. It's moving hard here. It's moving harder. It's moving harder. It's moving harder.
Ed saying lift.
Lift the table. Lift this table. Lift.
It uses all its energy, Lorraine says.
It started from this corner.
Oh, boy. Oh, no. It started in Joe's corner. Now,
It's really wait for me too. It's coming.
so get tingles every time I talk about it. This was my first extreme psychic. This was my first extreme psychic connection, right? Aside from seeing that light, I was sitting at the table, and as this thing is starting to happen again, I wasn't afraid at all, but my jaw dropped and tears just streamed out of my face. And I go, Lorraine, the sadness, right? I picked up this incredible grief. Guys can hold back tears, right? For the most part, but I was totally overcome and literally started like bawling I could not stop the grief from coming and the tears streaming down my face. I'll back it up 15 seconds. But that is because I'm telling you about my experience. This is what changed my life completely.
It's really wait for me too. It's coming.
Lorraine, the sadness. So this table is literally bouncing off of the floor. Bouncing off of the floor. Thanks, Matt. This high, a foot high at least, on all four legs. Boom, 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 boom. Now the interesting thing is that Drew was leaning back in his chair, completely perpendicular to the floor, and he should have fallen over, but he didn't. And he was literally like laying, like almost like he was levitating in his chair. Everybody was experiencing something completely different. And for me, I want to see a ghost. That didn't happen, but to feel this woman's grief, Priscilla, because I had invited her, and Ed said, are there any spirits in the house? Enter Jason. You know, I didn't object and say, I object to that. I just said, that's not funny, right? But I believe that it was her who worked her way into my fields, electromagnetic fields. I wasn't full of fear, but it was definitely fascinating. And people were on edge, of course. I didn't think we were being overcome by demonic entities or anything like that, which who knows? But you'll hear Ed say, you can still hear it. You'll hear Ed say that wasn't a human spirit. And I say, don't tell me that, right? Because I've just had these experiences. Oh no, don't tell me that. All right. Oh no. But that changed my life completely. And it happened. So we spread out through the house. I was sitting in a room by myself, as was the norm. Everybody would sit there and just observe and see what we can get. We had mini tape recorders, remember the little mini cassettes. And I didn't experience it in the room that I was sitting in by myself, but upstairs, people were actually being shoved down the stairs, right? Not like they would be pushed and shoved and they'd fall, but literally like, look, you know, and you could see that something was moving there. They weren't doing it themselves. And Ed was upstairs having heart palpitation. He was popping nitroglycerin at the time, and nobody knew where he was. So I'm actually writing the full-length novel version of this case right now because it's so profound for me. And you know, we'll get into my books in a while. And we decided to leave for that night. And the minute I went to put on my shoes, bawling my eyes out, tears just streaming down my face. I didn't know it then, but don't leave, help me, right? I made a connection with her and she didn't understand. Maybe she did understand, because they say that when you're at disembodied, you can read the minds of those around you. You can project things into their minds. They know exactly what you're thinking because they can do it. They're not insulated anymore. I don't know how it works, but it's the only way to describe it, is that when you're in the human body or the human form, you're completely insulated. It's hard on us to be able to, more difficult for us to see things. But anyway, so we got in the car and we left. And then as we're driving, I turn on the dome light, tears just streaming down my face. And Lorraine, they're all praying over me and doing the white light. So the white light, something you may find interesting, is visualizing a field of a golf ball size energy in your heart, right? And we call it the Christ light, right? And it's our connection to God, the creator, the source of all that is. And you visualize the light expanding into the size of a baseball, into a basketball, into a medicine ball, until it's completely surrounding our auric fields, or our bodies, well beyond the reach of our arms, and above and below, of course, and behind us, which a lot of us have to visualize, which we don't when people white light themselves. And that was just a form of protection, right? It's an intention to protect me with the light of God from within, which we all have, right, Steve? Yes. So anyway, it happened again and again. By the time I finally got home to Westport, the next day, I wrote a column. In fact, if somebody in the back row can go to the table and pick up the, oh, thanks, Mark. I wrote a column. I was at Sacred Heart University pulling up my grades, right? Because I didn't do well at Eastern Connecticut State U. There's a white piece of paper that says hauntings. So I wrote a column called Hauntings for the Sacred Heart University Spectrum newspaper, chronicling the cases that we were investigating together. And so that was with the Warrens. So it was a Catholic school, Catholic university, and everybody was interested in learning what it was like to work with the Warrens, right? This is the very first issue. The writing isn't that great, honestly. But I was a fledgling writer. But it chronicled the cases we were investigating together. And I was writing about this most profound experience that I'd had to date for that article. And this was Sunday, the next day. So I'd handed in on Monday, getting to be past dusk. And I dialed Lorraine at my desk and I said, Lorraine, that was just so amazing. Thank you for including me and all that stuff. And when are we going back? Right? Like, hey, yeah, when are we going back? Came ringing out. And she asked, well, we haven't even unpacked yet. We'll see you tomorrow night. And I said, okay, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm sure you're winding down for the night, and have a good night. See you tomorrow. Type, writing up the column. Lorraine, I really, really still feel strongly that we need to go back there, like immediately. Jason, we haven't unpacked yet. We haven't looked at the evidence yet. We have no permission to return, right? The family fled. We only had permission to go there once. We'll see you tomorrow night, right? I know you're excited. This is your first big case and so forth. I said, I am. I'm very excited about it, right? And I said, all right, I'll see you tomorrow night. Have a good night. Sorry to bother you. Lorraine, Jason, right? Are you writing about this for your column? And I said, yes. You're drawing it right to you. Call Lorraine, call Lorraine, call Lorraine. Help me out. Get back and help me. I didn't know, but that's exactly what was taking place. So let's talk about that. Yes, I made a connection with her in the field because I used my free will intention to communicate, to convert, to connect with her, right? Invited her back to the house. I didn't say, come back to the house, enter my auric field and overcome my thoughts and make me cry like a baby in front of everybody when I'm the newest guy, right? That wasn't my intention, but I made that connection with her. And how is this possible that a discarnate human spirit, right? If you left your body, how is this possible that you're able to project your thoughts or desires into somebody else? Does anybody know? Very interesting, isn't it? So think about every thought you have throughout your day. Is it your own?
No.
Think about Okay, and here's a classic example. That's a great way to describe this. So in addition to life after life, I read a book in my search for knowledge called The Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore. And she was a near-death experience hypnotist. Has anybody heard of her? Anybody? No? You've heard of her? Phenomenal. I'm getting tingles when I talk about it. Meaning that's really important to look into, right? So this was stumbled on completely by accident, where she was a near-death experience doctor, right? She's a specializing in that, and she actually put somebody under. Well, the background of the story is that there was this young man. He was just turning 21, and he said, "I want to go to the bar," right? This old timer bar, and he said he went by himself. He just turned 21. And he said, had the thought that I want to have an old timer's drink, like what my great grandfather would have if he was sitting in a saloon or in a bar. Why did that thought come to him? He didn't know, right? But the bartender said, all right. I don't know what he whipped up for him, but he had one. Thought it was interesting. Had another, maybe 2 or 3 total. Made it home safely, thankfully. And all of a sudden, when he woke up in the morning, his back was hurting him. His eyesight was poor. He wanted something to eat that he'd never asked for before, and he had an aversion to whatever it is that his mother was making for him. And she said, what in the hell is going on with you, right? His personality was changing right before her eyes. So they brought him to this hypnotist, and she put him under, but she also put the spirit of the old gentleman who was cohabitating him and gave him the thought to get that drink in the first place. And it opened up an entirely different field of study where we have something called human spirit cohabitation. So I was cohabitated by Priscilla somehow, even though I knew I was protected by the light and the power of God Almighty. And then I prayed, and I had, I don't think I had the rosary beads, but she was a human spirit. None of that stuff would affect her in any way, right? But she wanted help, and I made that connection, and there she was. He was in the bar. He put the intention out there. I wonder what I should have to drink. You wanted this, right? Because I want it. So what? Oh, I hit the microphone. Thank you. That was a faux pas. But this elderly gentleman who was disembodied, who believed that he couldn't get alcohol, especially his specific drink, in heaven, right? Maybe for other reasons, remained an earthbound human spirit. And where did he go? His favorite place in the world, the bar. And there he remained. And somehow he was able to interact with this young guy. Here comes a young dude. I wish I was young again, And somehow they made that connection. But anyway, she talked to him. Well, because now how does she hypnotize a discarnate human spirit at the same time she's hypnotizing somebody who's embodied? Maybe it would be easier to hypnotize somebody who's outside of the body because they're not insulated. That's something to consider. I have no answer for that, but it's a hypothesis that I just thought of. I should write a book about that. No time. But so this is a phenomena that is very real. So earthbound human spirits absolutely can interact with you and give you thoughts, right? Is it the same way that we can pick up the thoughts of a recently departed loved one? I hear my mother's voice, right? I'm very coming by me, right? My father, my grandfather, my brother or something. I see them. I know they're still alive because I just, right? Because they have a connection. They feel that connection, or they are actually having a psychic experience that they don't want to talk about because people think they're, right? But there's so much of this happening right now. There's no way to deny that there is a phenomena taking place, right? Show of hands. There is a phenomenon taking place. Higher. I have some disbelievers over here. And that's fine, because you'll never understand, right, unless you have the experience yourself. And I don't expect anybody to believe it. There's scientifically minded people. But the science that we can only perceive visible light is sound. That's science. It's indisputable, right? We cannot perceive anything outside of visible light. And then there's all kinds of phenomena that they're talking about that we're only seeing a reflection of physical light. We're not even really seeing what we're told we're seeing. And then everything is actually inverted. We're actually all upside down. It's so bizarre. But I mean, there's so many things that I can't even go there. There's way too many avenues. But I suppose I should check the time. Wow. How long do we have, Rebecca?
about 30 more minutes.
Okay. Time flies, right? So that human spirit cohabitation is something to really consider. So what happens when a demonic or inhuman spirit can also affect your thoughts? So that's called oppression, right? So there's several phases. So we'll get into, that was the most profound case of my career with the Warrens, which began in 1990. I had transferred out to Eastern Washington University, but I had met a guy at Eastern Connecticut State University who's became one of my friends, and we actually roomed together. And he had a big affinity for Washington State, specifically Seattle. It's like the seed was planted there, right? Again, a reason that I went there, one of the reasons I think is to connect with this guy, Andy, different Andy. And so I looked for creative writing schools because I wanted to pursue English creative writing. And I found a fantastic curriculum out at Eastern Washington State University. And I just went, I told my dad about it. It was
froze
really
up.
very inexpensive, and he was thrilled that I was giving up the band and going to actually pursue a college education for English creative writing, not communications, because he was still convinced I'd never make it as an author. And it's a reasonable thing to say, because most people don't. You know, most people who write books, maybe will sell 20 books in their entire lifetime as independent authors. Anyway, so I flew out in the middle of a blizzard in the winter semester. It was a trimester school. Flew out in the middle of a blizzard, ended up becoming president of my fraternity. I was the first chapter president of the Sigma Phi Epsilon National Fraternity. And my dad was thrilled because I got a scholarship through that. And while I was there, I got a call in the spring from Lorraine Warren. I don't even know how she got my phone number. She must have called our house phone. And how you doing?
You're not bored.
Okay. All right. Anyway, Lorraine called me and asked me to investigate a case that they became aware of in Rathdrum, Idaho, which was less than 45 minutes east of Eastern Washington, which was Spokane, Cheney area. And I said, sure, I'd be delighted to, as their lead investigator, just me, you know. And I said, absolutely. So I actually said, I asked, who can I bring with me? And I knew this guy who was a football player, as tall as I was. Not nearly as good looking, but he was a tall guy. And I brought him with me. And I was driving my black Pontiac Fiero. Yeah. So I was 6'5" at the time, and I'm sitting in a Pontiac Fiero, and so was he. He was a huge, right? But it was like my go-kart, right? So we went out there, and hey, keep it down, will you? So I went out there. Yeah, I'm 54. Yeah.
Oh, he didn't turn 55 yet. I graduated.
Okay.
Don't brag.
Almost as good looking. So we're having fun. So we went out there and interviewed the family. And while we're there, we saw a wooden box full of firewood sitting, near the fireplace, move on its own accord, literally 5 feet. And we're like, what? And the rocking chair rocking on its own accord and so forth. And hearing the testimony of the little girls, I think they were young teens, and the terrifying things. One was seeing a charred black form standing at the side of her bed, at the footboard of her bed, wind in the basement from no origin, right? Just like a wind, strange wind, and other things. So we'd left, and I had called the Warrens, and I actually wrote a handwritten letter. No, I typed it up on a typewriter, those old technologies. And I sent it, mailed it out, and actually I got a copy of it from Judy, who's the Warrens' daughter, because she found it in Ed's files, and she sent it a photograph of it. I didn't get the whole thing. I was like, I wish I had the full version of that, but it's the envelope and it's the letter saying, I'm very concerned for these girls and for the family. So Ed asked me to perform sufumigation. Let me know what that is. You know what that is? Ever heard of it? Sufumigation. Suffumigation. So it's a blessing in places. It's a Catholic ritual using high church incense, frankincense and myrrh, with charcoal discs, right? You light the charcoal disc, you put it in the bowl, you let it spark, and it turns white because it's burning. And then you put the frankincense and myrrh granules on top, and it emits a very, very wonderful perfume. But what it is doing is raising the vibration of the living space. And you have to open up every door, every drawer, every place with all the windows and doors, outside doors closed, to let that fume fill the entire house. You have to turn off the smoke alarms. So there is no place that it will not go. And the purpose is raising the vibration of the living space, making it inhospitable for anything of a negative, deeply, truly negative nature, especially diabolical nature. It's like fumigating your house against darkness. It's like a skunk will repel us. High church incense is completely off limits for them and they can't take it, right? So it turns out that these entities were actually gained access into the house for various reasons. And this practice was meant to expel them. So Randy and I we had bowls, for every room, and we lit them. And every time we lit the charcoal and put the granules in and started to recite the Our Father prayer, the phone would ring 3 times, right? The family we asked they would leave, right? And I knew that was a distraction, right? Because we recite the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the 23rd Psalm. The 23rd Psalm is so powerful, verified from an independent pranic healing master from Indonesia who's got psychic sight. It literally supercharges your aura around you by reciting the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, all the way through, right? Super powerful. And he's actually Christian, amazing man. And but he verified that very nicely. But the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the 23rd Psalm, you light a blessed white candle, leaving it burning in the room, and you let the smoke fill the whole place, right? But every time we went into another room, it would ring, the phone would ring 3 times, but we continued undaunted until we completed the whole thing. And we felt that the house was purged of negative entities, and the family returned. And as we were leaving, actually, we were in the house and we heard this ungodly noise, right? And it was a kitten who had gotten its head caught underneath a door to the basement. Like somebody opened the door as it's leading in, but we freed it and it ended up being fine. But we thought that was very, very odd. Could have been an attack of some kind, right? Because cats are also your defense. Cats can see into ranges that we can't. Anyway, as we were leaving in my Pontiac Fiero, we're driving down these beautiful road, the huge evergreen trees, and the car just completely cut out. Like it lost all power and like the engine was completely cut out. We had to actually have his girlfriend come pick us up and have the car towed. And the next day, the mechanic said, there's nothing wrong with your car. It started right up. Now, I didn't bless the car, right? The same way I did the van. Thankfully, we weren't thrown off the road, but maybe something that was there wasn't that powerful. But I didn't bless the car when I think about that, right? So that sufumigation worked to rid the house of these dark or diabolical spirits, because that's religious sufumigation, right? But it did not affect the Indian spirits that were burned alive, right? The Indians that were burned alive, whose spirits were still on property, and other things, right? I don't want to spoil it for you, and we don't have time. But that was something that was so profound. I met 2 amazing women and an amazing scientist because of that case, who became my lifelong friends. And I call them my psychic mom, my 2 psychic moms, because they were 20 years older than me, but they did amazing things with me. And I don't think we have time to talk about all that tonight, but I wanted to get into, I had actually picked up the column called Hauntings at Eastern Washington State U, and they became really interested. So we had the university fly the Warrens out to do their college presentation and research, investigate some of the haunted spots on campus. And they came to my fraternity house. We had a cake. And then I started teaching a class, non-credit, based on everything that I had learned and experienced from my own perspective to students and the general population in Spokane. And I had about 35 people, which was really cool. It was for free. I rented out I got the room to use for free. And I got to relay the information, just like I got to learn information from the Warrens. I was relaying what I learned to the very interested public because there were no TV shows, there was no paranormal shows or any of those types of things, right? It was just a genuine interest. I put a flyer out, said, are you experiencing haunting phenomenon? I can maybe help you and so forth. So I started getting cases, handwritten letters sent to me, and they were all phenomenal. And earthbound human spirits, one after the other, who just had not wanted to cross over. And because I had met this incredible two women who worked with my pineal gland, I'll give you an example because it's too profound not to. I was at one owned a crystal store, and she was a family friend of this family. And I got to spend so much time there. And she asked me one night as I was going to night class, she asked me to close my eyes, and she pressed a stone of some form up to my third eye. And she asked, what do you see? And I said, I see a violet light, purple. And she said, okay. And there I remained for another 10 minutes with my eyes closed. What do you see now? She asked me. I said, I see a white light, right? She said, you're a good boy, right? I went to night class that night. I was sitting in the back row because I was so tall and I was considerate of people in front of me. I didn't want to block their view. And all of a sudden, like a light switch went on, full color, lightsaber bright, single color auras around everybody. Blue, red, yellow for the professor, browns, any color, I can't remember. And I didn't look at but I was like, whoa, I'm seeing something, right? And I was like, oh my God, and it was like, like lightsabers from Star Wars. That's how bright they were, right? It wasn't any sounds. What? Something. So she did something to tweak my third eye, right? And after about 10 minutes, I didn't look at myself. Can anybody in here see auric fields? Okay. I didn't. Okay. I learned that the professor's was yellow because he's imparting knowledge. So I was wondering if mine was yellow. But I know that mine generally is like a teal color, like a blue-green. But I didn't look at myself. I was like, wow. And all of a sudden, I said, okay, I need to focus on the class. It was actually a medieval English literature class. That didn't do anything for me. Waste of money. But I said, I need to focus on the class. I need to turn this off somehow. And it turned off. I have never to this day been able to turn it back on. And I've been to every psychic you can imagine because I do all these conventions all across the country. And there's all psychics and visionaries and light workers. Maybe Biff can help me. I could not turn it back on. And I pray, I said, if I can be of service to humanity, I will use my gift for free to tell people what I see if I pick up information. But after that happened, I had all kinds of amazing experiences where I was just intuiting information. I'd go into a house, I got a letter, we buried my husband, we see him in the house every night, he doesn't respond, please help. So I went with Valerie, who's the other psychic friend. I went in and I said, your husband feels very guilty about something that he's done. I want to get the whole family together and everybody sit in a circle, ask him to sit in the middle of the circle and face whoever's speaking. And I asked, who's Cat? Oh, that's what he called me. I was like, okay, that makes sense. It wasn't like, wow, it was just information. And it was because I believe it was meant to be, just like everything was meant to be, right? It's synchronicities. And it turned out that he did something terrible to one of his grandsons who didn't forgive him. And then he had a good cry and forgave him. We didn't know what the details were, but it was none of our business. But we convinced him, in order for your grandfather to be at peace and for him to cross over and for your family to be at peace, you need to love him unconditionally and forgive him and realize that everybody makes mistakes. No fucking way. You say, damn. Anyway, but he finally did and he forgave him. And Valerie said he's ready to go, right? And he went. The other case, I walked in and I said, I see a chrome gas cap. An old-fashioned gas cap with a chrome face. And the son grumbles, and he opens the door to the garage. He's like, come here. And I walk in, and there's this beautiful pickup truck, powder blue, restored pickup truck. And I said, you put a lockable gas cap on there, didn't you? And he pulls out a banana box from underneath the bench, and there's the chrome gas cap. I said, your father spent years restoring this pickup. Yep. He doesn't want to cross over until you put that chrome gas cap back on, because that's his pride and joy. Something as simple as that. Or going to the bar because I want to drink, right? Or I want to be forgiven. I can't leave until I know that I'm forgiven in my heart, because obviously he felt badly about what he did. So time. Anyway, so we're going to go until midnight. How late can we go in case we do want to go later?
The building shuts down at 9 and
Okay.
yeah.
So, all right, we'll have a camp out at Union Cemetery. So that brings me to the purpose. That's my history, right? I had graduated college. I had all kinds of cases that were amazing, and I graduated college, and I wanted to go back home to where I'm from in Connecticut and be near my family and figure out what I want to do with myself. So I left, went back home, and I put it just like in Washington. I wanted to convey to others what my experiences were, because I had so many great experiences in Washington. So I made a flyer, and I was actually a banquet manager at the Westport Inn, and which is nothing more than a glorified waiter, by the way. And I put a flyer, and I said transcendence, right? And I wanted to, there's so much I didn't tell you because there's just no time about my experiences out there, but I wanted to convey the information. So I got a phone call, and it was late October, from a frantic woman pleading for help about the experiences that she and her family were having inside their house in Monroe, Connecticut. And I knew immediately that this sounded very bad. So I immediately called my mentor and my friend, my teacher, Ed Warren, and he was very concerned about it as well. But this case was one that, of course, changed my life. And we were never going to talk about it. The family wanted no recognition, even after it was completely resolved, and for good reason, because most of the cases that happen that are the worst of the worst, you'll never hear about, because they want no recognition. They don't want the media circus. They don't want the ridicule. And this is, again, it's before any of the television shows came out, right? There were no ghost hunters and paranormal this and paranormal that, and 10,000 paranormal teams with their baseball hats and t-shirts and sunglasses and, you know, bulging biceps and all that stuff. And it wasn't until 2012 that I learned that there were paranormal teams all over the place, right? I'd kind of just said, what? You know, I kind of just did my own thing for a while. And that they were using Ouija boards inside people's homes. And I said, what? Right? In homes that they're claiming, you know, in families' homes that they're claiming to help. And I asked, what the is going on? So I called John Zaffis, and he said, it's an epidemic, you know? And I called the woman, who I called Linda, and I explained to her, and she says, my God, you know, if you can help one family, Kelly, her daughter, from experiencing the absolute nightmare that we went through, then please just change our likenesses and tell the story. And I decided that I was going to use my English creative writing skills to recreate the case in a cinematic horror fiction format, like you're reading a Stephen King fiction book, a true crime book, but it's all true. And I write in a cinematic writing style that makes you feel like you're right there experiencing everything from everybody's perspective as it's happening, right? And those who have read my books can attest to that. Rosalie is one of my first readers. And okay, thank you. And I included in an interesting device, which was a description from an agent. I used a chapter analysis section at the end, where I explain everything that I talked to you about tonight in a condensed format, but also how and why spirit activity takes place, from my understanding and all the years that I've been experiencing these things, but what this family did right and wrong every step of the way, and how that made things much worse for them. And then explaining how and why Ouija boards work the way they do, which was the catalyst, or was really what caused this case to spiral out of control. So to give you the nuts and bolts, I wrote Dark Siege, A Connecticut Family's Nightmare. It's 467 pages. And it began just as this mother and her daughter were driving by Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut, which is one of the most haunted cemeteries in New England, simply because of its age. I was just there filming some footage for some videos I'm making, but many of the faces of the stones are completely, you know, faded away. That's how old it is. You can't even tell who's interred in the ground. But it was a very stormy afternoon just before Halloween. There's a big rainstorm, thunder and lightning, classic stuff. And there's a little 6-year-old girl in the back of the car. And the mother's remarking about the light, the leaves, and she says, be very watchful, Kelly. Maybe we'll see a ghost. It's just before Halloween. We wouldn't want it to follow us home, would we? Stop, that's scary. She's leaning down on the seat, but then she's looking for it, right? And she sees, as the leaves are whipping around and a leaf whips up against the car window, this black, shadowy, humanoid figure in the distance. And she didn't know what to make of it. She'd never seen a ghost before. She didn't even know what she was seeing was real, walking right through the gravestones, right up through the wrought iron fence, right up into the road as the car passes by. And she can literally see the guy snarling at her. And she's like, she's, inching down on the window, and she sees this guy disappear, reappear, not float, not walk, but just closer to the car until he's right up against the car, snarling at her and screams. She hears this squeaking sound of the fingertips going down the glass. But how is that possible? Projecting into the mind, right? But turns out that she's clairvoyant because mom's an artist, which makes her a natural sensitive, and she's looking for him because she planted the idea in her mind. All hauntings begin in the mind, yet it was as powerful as me saying, come back to the house with us. And she's spotting it and noticing it, right? And she says, she screamed, and the mother, turned the wheel, and the car spun out on the slick leaves and hit the curb, and she's freaking out. She's like, what's wrong? There's a ghost, just like you said. Oh, there's no such things as ghosts, right? And of course, everybody makes fun of her at the house. 16-year-old brother, 17-year-old sister, father who's a real estate broker, and the last one to believe in ghosts. He's a very left-brain, scientific-minded guy. It's true. And even mom didn't believe it, of course, but they realized something really spooked her. And then mom sees him in the kitchen the next morning, walking through the washing machine, right up to her, right up through her. Did I just make this up? Am I imagining this? She calls her best friend, saying, I have to get out of the house. Kelly's at school, Tyler and Sarah are at school. Didn't tell her husband. 16-year-old brother, Tyler, and his two best friends have the house to themselves after they got off the school bus that Friday afternoon. They see this guy walking the perimeter of the property. Then they turn around and they see the sliding door close from within, and they go in the house, and there was a shaker cup, which is an aluminum cup with stir sticks on the bar, wobbles and goes, again, wobble, flings off the bar, and they run around like lunatics, like wondering what to do. And holy, Kelly was telling the truth. There's something in the house. What are we going to do? Let's go get a Ouija board, one of them says, right? And the one response was, those things are stupid. They don't work. Right? Or that sounds like a really bad idea, Kyle says. And he said, well, what else are we going to do? What else do you do? There was no shows. They had no idea, right? But they know that a Ouija board exists. That was the worst mistake they could have made. They ran to the Trumbull Mall, the KB Toy and Hobby, all right? Bought a Ouija board. And as they're looking at the board, they notice this woman standing next to them in a pink shawl, older, elderly woman. And she says, boys, do yourselves a favor and put that back on the shelf. And they look at each other like, what is this? What the? And they look, and no woman. Right? And they all made fun of it. And of course, Tyler's trying to run through the mall trying to find this lady to find out what, can't find her anywhere. And the mall's closing, and then Jimmy and Kyle come up, and they have the board in the bag. And he's like, why did you buy that board after that lady? She said, that lady's a kook. They don't know what, it was just. So who was she? Guardian angel, somebody trying to spare them from opening a doorway to ruin, right? They didn't heed the warning. They got the warning, but they didn't heed it. So they came home and got some pizzas and made fun of the whole situation, lit some candles, said, oh, you have to have candles lit, right? And issued all the wrong challenges. Are there any spirits here? Well, where is that question quantified? Are there any spirits where? In this room? In this house? On this property? In this town, county, state, continent, planet, plane, world, universe, multiverse? What? You can bet, as Ed Warren says, there are spirits listening, waiting for such an opportunity to go and answer that call, because that's what they need, is your permission to enter your world. Right? And it's as simple as that. It's your free will intention. Ed called the Ouija board the most dangerous piece of negative occult paraphernalia there is, right? And it's responsible, its use is responsible for 95% of all the cases of diabolical infestation, oppression, and possession, leading to exorcism in some cases, which is the end result, the last most awful stage that you don't ever possibly want to experience. And they issued all the wrong challenges, being 16-year-olds. Why are you after my little 6-year-old girl? Come after me, you big, you know. And literally all contact stopped after that invitation was made until they were in their bed, Tyler's room. They all slept over that night. And it was the most awful, rotting stench smell you can imagine. They opened the windows, and Tyler's leaning out the window, and they hear oh no, they woke up to the doorbell ringing, but it sounded off. I said like being by the house was off. It's like dong dong. It was like going sharp and flat and so forth until they all woke up and they heard the doorbell ringing. Who the hell's coming to the house at 3 a.m, right? 3 is a very important number. I'm sorry we don't have another 3 hours because it's really, there's a lot of info. Who wants part 2? What? Yes. Okay, yes. Okay, yeah. How much time do I have? Okay, 31? Okay, we have 31. Can everybody stay for another 30 minutes, Rebecca? Yes? Oh, 10 minutes if the card starts shutting.
No, you have 31 minutes on the card, and then when it hits 10 minutes, it starts.
People are fleeing. They're running away. Oh, I have a story to tell about my friend Lou, right? Okay, so anyway, they issued all the wrong challenges. Tyler's peeking out the window looking. There's nobody ringing the doorbell, but there it rang 8 times. And Sarah, the eldest daughter, is running in the room saying, what are you guys having you invite people over for a party or something? She's, completely irate and upset. And they're trying to tell her that there's ghosts in the house. And she's like, please, But anyway, the problem is that nobody communicated with each other. They should have, Kelly was seeing this guy in the house that followed her home from the cemetery from the very beginning, right? She was seeing a black kitty cat, okay? All completely normal because she can see them, right? They weren't putting any kind of monstrous appearance and things like that. It was trying to gain her trust, which is the whole purpose. And Linda didn't confide in her husband because he would think that she's completely out of her mind. She confided in her best friend. Tyler and his 2 best friends tried to tell Sarah that they used the Ouija board. She saw them using it. And until she started experiencing the things that they were describing, she didn't believe them either. Okay, so nobody was communicating. They didn't want to admit they used the Ouija board, even though they realized that was a very stupid thing to do. So the awful things were happening, and projections into the mind. Unbelievable activity in a mass projection into their mind. Everyone experiencing the same thing. Millions of black flies shooting up from the drain in the sink, right? Oh, that's Amityville Horror. That doesn't. It's the same stuff, right? What does it do? Yeah, that it causes you to emit fear. You're completely terrorized, like, oh my God, what did I do to my house that I'm living in, and what's going to come next? But then they're gone within an instant. And that happened during the exorcism in the church. I wasn't there to witness it. I was doing sufumigation, which is my specialty. Sufumigation in the house. Well. But it was absolutely the most fascinating and terrifying case that I'd ever investigated to date. And again, we were never, ever going to talk about it. They wanted no recognition. In fact, Paranormal Witness wanted me to have it, and they said, no way, right? Because what happened is, even after the exorcism was successful, I won't tell you who it was that was overcome, they came back a month and a half later in what Ed described as the most severe case of demoniacal retribution we've ever seen, including incubus and succubus attacks, which are sexual in nature. And these were extreme attacks on 2 of the teenage boys. And if it weren't for Bishop James Long, my friend there on the left, who I met at my first paranormal convention ever, when I realized I need to tell people my story, that I worked, with the Warrens, this incredible couple. They're the pioneers of the entire modern paranormal investigation craze. And I had the privilege and the honor of working alongside both of them, which is a very rare thing. But it was Bishop Long. I sent him the whole PDF for part 2. I couldn't release an 800-page novel as my first debut self-published novel either. So I was going to write the second part later. And he convinced me to release it exactly as I wrote it, because I write in a cinematic style. It makes you feel like you're right there experiencing every bit of this fright and the terror and the the horror. And he convinced me to do it. And he said, cases of incubus and succubus attacks are rare, as is possession, full possession. We're requiring full exorcism. But this was an extreme bunch of attacks. It's deeply disturbing. But he said people need to know that this is rare, but very, very real. And if it happens, you need to seek help from clergy immediately. So who are the clergy, right? These guys, right? I'm the host, right? Bringing this to everybody's awareness. But these four gentlemen, one of which I've worked with in a case up in upstate New York, Bill Bean, the Reverend Bill Bean, the spiritual warrior, that's his name, are the last line of defense for stupid paranormal groups that are using Ouija boards inside people's homes, right? And for people delving into the occult, negative occult, and people practicing satanic occult practices and so forth, or willfully, intentionally summoning these entities into your life, or necromancy inside cemeteries. Ed Warren always said, the spirits that are lurking in cemeteries are most often not those that have once inhabited the body that are interred there, but the other ones that people are willfully inviting using black magic and necromancy and satanic practices, which is very real and far more numerous than you can imagine, right? And that's why I was guided, again, another impulse to create this amazing seminar. I'm billing it as an extreme immersion event because we're going to show the reality behind the real demonic infestation, oppression, and possession, how and why it happens, first of all, to warn people against delving into things. That's the whole reason I wrote Dark Siege and Dark Siege 2. I'll show you the copy of the book number 2. Is to warn kids against delving into things they don't understand. Don't use Ouija boards. Look at the logo for Parker Brothers on the box. Anybody know what it is for all their games? Looks to me to be a spiraling black vortex. All right? Yeah. Go look at it, okay? You know where they're originally made? Salem, Massachusetts, and being mass produced. Yeah, people are selling them. They're making their own cool Ouija boards so people can use them. Now they're making Holy Spirit boards. Talk to Jesus, right? It's insanity, right? And that's actually what Bishop Long was talking about on his podcast. These guys, especially Archbishop Ronald File Enright, right? He's a 70-year-old man. He's been at this for 46 years, I believe. He's formed the International Order of St. Michael, the Archangel Exorcists, right? He's bringing all these exorcists from all over the world together under one umbrella from all different denominations and all different aspects, right? Bishop Cloud, he says, all he wants to see, he says, as long as we're eating each other alive, meaning one group of Catholics against the others, against the Protestants, against all these other groups who are saying, oh, my way is the right way, and you're damned. As long as we're doing that, right? And people of all faiths, as long as you're eating each other alive and judging each other and thinking I'm better than you are and you're better than that group, then we've already done the devil's work, is what he said, right? And phenomenal. I'm bringing all these guys together in one seminar on July 22nd, 2023 at the Heritage Hotel, beautiful Heritage Hotel in Southbury, Connecticut from 2 to 6 p.m. And it's a 4-hour seminar you'll never forget. In fact, I had Matt come help me today, set everything up. Yes. Isn't that what I said? I'm sorry.
It's
July 22nd, 2023, 2023. It's one day, Saturday from 2 to 6 p.m. I have the ability to scan or swipe cards and sell you tickets because they're going. It's a 4-hour event. The basic entry is $35. There's an advanced seating with an hour with the speakers beforehand, plus a poster, an autograph poster with all of the speakers that I put together. It's just something to take home with everybody's autographs and so forth. And most of these guys don't care about autographs, but some people like having keepsakes, right? So it's just a little bit. And then there's a buffet dinner, which is an add-on for 2.5 hours with all the speakers. And it's actually really a really nice dinner. But I can give you the links and so forth. You can go to www.darksiege.com and scroll down and click on the graphic, which will take you right to the Eventany page where you can browse the different tickets and buy tickets. And I really encourage you come. to meet these amazing men. And the thing is, there's so many paranormal groups out there. There's so many self-proclaimed demonologists out there, you know, and everybody thinks they have all the answers, but these guys are the ones that are going to come and save your neck. It's the clergy. So I have friends who are amazing psychics, and they've helped me on cases. They can see and perceive things that would blow you away, and they can handle things remotely, never even leaving their house. But they bump into things that they say, I am not going to touch that, right? Because these types of, when they're that level, they come after your family and they come after your loved ones and your pets, right? For even thinking about getting involved in those cases. And it's always the clergy. This man is one of the most pious men I know. And he's actually the first Catholic bishop and exorcist who's come to the aid of the paranormal community, right? He's on Eli Roth Presents Legion of Exorcists right now. It's a show airing on the Travel Channel. Phenomenal, phenomenal. He's been a huge proponent of all my books, and he's the one that convinced me to release it. Archbishop Cloud, he says, as long as I can share Christ, I don't need anything other than, you know, my flight and my hotel room taken care of. And Bill Bean travels all over the world. Amazing man, just an incredible spiritual warrior. And I happen to be the host where I can basically bring these people together so that everybody can share in their collective experience, which is nothing short of phenomenal and extraordinary. And I encourage everybody to come. And you can also do live stream if you don't want to come in person, but you're all local. So if you have nothing to do on a Saturday, it's also very empowering, right? Because it's scary, right? But they're gonna show examples of the effects of demonic infestation and oppression, which means the attack phase, where they're actually going after people, trying to wear them down and break them down to seize control of their bodies and fully possess them. And what it takes to deliver people of these forces and exercise them, and the mental healthcare that is required afterwards. Can you imagine your consciousness being pushed aside and being you can't even believe it unless you see the video of the words coming out of your mouth, or the things that you would do or say, or the abilities that you would suddenly gain, which are never yours, of course, right? But the purpose is, my whole purpose in coming to you tonight and in sharing my story with everybody on Zoom is to warn people that we are at war. This is the gloves are coming off, because we are now embroiled in a spiritual battle where evil is operating in plain sight, and they intend to destroy everything that is good and wholesome and natural and replace it with an AI artificial world, right? Which is transhumanism, okay? And it goes much further than that. And it's the event is meant to help people understand, how do I protect myself and my family and my young ones and my elderly and my pets, and ensure that my home is off limits to these negative forces. And I'll teach you how to do this fumigation, you know, and there's just incredible wisdom coming from these people. And they just want people to do the same thing I want them to do, is just don't get involved in this negative occult stuff. Put your Ouija boards away. And I even have a return in your Ouija board ticket for zero cost, right? Turn it in, right? Let these men dispose of it the right way. So we have a couple minutes for any questions.
There's some questions on the chat.
Yes.
Give them a little priority because.
Yes. Thank you.
One was the question about fluoride that you mentioned earlier. That is there any scientific evidence that the pineal gland, third eye, is affected by fluoride? And does that affect children and how they can many can see imaginary friends, and then eventually cannot?
That has absolutely everything to do with calcifying your pineal gland, but you can decalcify it. So that'll be evidence that you've decalcified it. But just research, you know, I'm sure there's a plethora of evidence about the fluoride causing the issue.
And there was a question about whether you've ever witnessed or assisted in an exorcism.
I'm an empath. I pick up the emotion and the grief of this one woman named Priscilla, and I cry at weddings, right, and funerals, because I'm picking up everybody's grief and emotion. I can't even imagine, you know, being in something as horrific as a true exorcism, where horrific things were happening, like even in this case, take place. I witnessed video I've heard testimony. Ed Warren has videos of different things that he's done, but you know, it's I've studied about a good 20 cases of that, and I'm talking about the horrific stuff, right? So, yes, blue shirt. They bind them, at least the clergy does, and they're very adamant about people not performing exorcism unless they know what they're doing. So they bind them in the name of Jesus Christ. I arrest you in the name of Jesus Christ. Thank you, Archangel Michael, for taking this being, you know, wherever it is they send them. But to expel something and then let it have free reign, you would think that they would just take off and go elsewhere because they're always going to lose. It may take a while, but there's nothing that can overcome the power of the Creator. Yeah. Yes. They didn't get in. They tried everything in the book. That's what in this volume 2. They tried every trick in the book to be let inside, including